is discarded. Let's say that together. Discarded. Discarded means something that was thrown out. Say that with me. Discarded means something that was thrown out. This word is trudging. Let's say that together. Trudging. Trudging means walking with slow and heavy steps. Say that with me. Trudging means walking with slow and heavy steps. Ada's Violin, the story of the Recycled Orchestra of Paraguay. Written by Susan Hood and illustrated by Sally Wern Comport. What was Ada's hometown made of? Ada Rios grew up in a town made of trash. Do you remember what the people called gancheros do each day? Every morning at dawn, Ada heard the first garbage trucks rumble and roll down the road to the cachorra. Beep, beep, beep. Backing into the landfill, they tipped their loads up, and crash! The trash came tumbling down, 1,500 tons each day. Ada and her friends watched as the gancheros, recyclers, scrambled, tearing into plastic bags with long-handled hooks, pushing aside moldy produce, and grabbing anything they could to recycle or sell. The going rates? 5 cents for a pound of cardboard, 10 cents for a pound of plastic. What were some things that people found in the trash? This noisy, stinking, sweltering slum was not the most nurturing neighborhood. Ada watched, eyes wide, but she didn't say much. And yet she liked to imagine each garbage truck was a box of surprises. One never knew what might be inside. Her father had found appliances, toys, perfumes, and antique watches. One woman even discovered a small box full of gold jewelry. Little did Ada know, there was a bigger surprise waiting for her in the landfill. What did Ada love to do? Every day when Ada's parents went to work, Grandmother Miriam cared for Ada and her little sister, Noelia. Grandma loved to sing rock and roll songs from the 1960s. The girls grew up to the tunes of the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, and Creedence Clearwater Revival. Ada loved to sing too, but only when no one was listening. Ada's dad brightened the night with stories and songs of great musicians. He turned up the radio and pointed out the sounds each instrument made. Ada heard one above all others. Zing! Went the strings of the violin. What did the girls do each day? When the girls started school, Grandma returned to work as a recycler, collecting bottles and cans in the city. Classes let out at noon. Young Ada was in charge of Noelia until her parents were done with work. At first, the girls stayed close to home, playing with Grandma Miriam's doggies and making sand cakes in the dirt. Soon, they joined their cousins, playing hide and seek or a game of handball in the streets. What did the older kids do? In time, they ventured further afield, walking down to the bodega to get candy. But Ada noticed the teenagers hanging out in the alleys, grumbling about life in the landfill looming ahead. What would happen to them? To her, to her little sister? She watched as the older kids turned to gangs and got into fights. One day, when Ada was 11 years old, her grandmother saw a sign posted on the wall of a chapel. Violin, guitar, cello, taught Saturdays at 8 a.m. Fabio Chavez. How Grandma had longed to learn music. Too late for her, maybe, she thought, but not for her granddaughters. She signed them up without asking them, or their parents. Ada's heart sang out. Thanks to her abuela, she could leave her worries behind and learn to play. Why was Ada frustrated? At the first class, the teacher, Fabio Chavez, had 3 guitars and 2 violins to share. Ada chose a violin right away, but 10 children had signed up. Frustrated, Ada and her friends found that there were not enough instruments to go around. And there was a bigger problem. Everyone quickly realized that the children would need to practice at home, that it wasn't safe to be seen with an expensive instrument in Catera, where a violin is worth more than a house. Watching the children play amid broken glass and rusty metal, Senor Chavez knew he had to do something. He remembered a band called Les Luthiers that made its own instruments. That was it. He asked Nicholas Cola Gomez, a ganchero and carpenter, for help. Senor Gomez found a discarded drum with a big hole in it. What could he use to fix it? He picked through the trash and discovered an old X-ray film. Would that work? It did. Senor Gomez kept experimenting, and others, like Tito Romero, helped. Inventing instruments wasn't easy, but they fiddled around, discovering which materials hit just the right notes. They transformed oil drums into cellos, water pipes into flutes, and packing crates into guitars. What did Ada choose? Soon there were enough instruments for all the children who wanted to play. Ada chose a violin made from an old paint can, an aluminum baking tray, a fork, and pieces of wooden crates. Worthless to thieves, it was invaluable to her. It was a violin of her very own. What kind of practices did Senor Chavez have? Senor Chavez set up a strict schedule of 3-hour lessons. Class had no classroom, so they played outside, despite the 100-degree heat and sudden downpours. At first, Ada and the others struggled. Sharps and flats clanged and clashed. Playing an instrument is a process. It doesn't matter if one is rich or poor, ugly, fat, thin. You cannot learn to play an instrument overnight, Senor Chavez told the children. Some kids decided it was too much work and gave up, but not Ada. After lessons, she would practice at home, sometimes 2 hours a day. What did the gancheros listen for every day? In time, the screeches, twangs, and tweets hit all the right notes. Their class became a small island where Chavez taught them to respect themselves and one another. Be kind, always say please and thank you, say you're sorry, be dedicated when you commit to something, Senor Chavez told the children. Soon the ragtag crew of kids learned to tune in, to listen to one another, to band together. The recycled orchestra was born. From then on, there was something new in the air in Catera. Gancheros trudging home from the landfill might lift their heads to hear the sounds of Ada's violin, or the strains of Bibi's cello, or the strum of Noelia's guitar. A symphony of sound helped to lift them beyond the heat, the stench, and their aching backs. What did Ada do when she closed her eyes? With her violin, Ada could close her eyes and imagine a different life. She could soar on the high, bright, bittersweet notes to a place far away. She could be who she was meant to be. What did Ada do? As Ada's skill grew, so did her confidence. Once timid, she now took center stage playing solos. She helped teach the younger children too. Her teachers and fellow students took note. When she was 12 years old, Ada was named a first violinist. Imagine, she was first at something. Shortly after, she and her 39 fellow musicians were invited to perform concerts in Catera, and later in the nearby capital city of Asuncion. Word of this extraordinary orchestra spread. Soon they were asked to perform in other cities, and even other countries. Ada and her friends flew on their first airplane, stayed in their first hotel, swam in the bright blue waters of Rio de Janeiro, sampled their first pastries and pineapple, and saw sights they never imagined. The world dazzled them, just as they dazzled the world. How did Ada feel? When Ada was 16, the orchestra received a very special invitation. They were asked to tour with a world-famous rock band. More than 35,000 people awaited them at their first concert stop in Bogota, Colombia. Ada was more than nervous. She didn't know how to enter or how to greet the audience. She went blank. She saw a giant stage with glaring lights and heard people screaming. What did the audience do during the music? But she didn't have to worry. As the recycled orchestra took the stage, the people who had paid to see the rock band cheered for them. The enormous audience sang and swayed to the music as the orchestra played, and as the performance came to a close, a crescendo of cheers, chants, and applause resounded across the park. The astonished kids bowed, grinning at one another. They had discovered the surprise waiting in the landfill. Buried in the trash was music, and buried in themselves was something to be proud of. This is a picture of the actual recycled orchestra. It was a real band that played together. Let's say this word together. Discarded. Discarded means something that was thrown out. On this page of our book, it says that Senor Gomez found a discarded drum. That means he found a drum that someone had thrown in the trash. We could use the word discarded another way, like we could say, when we cleaned my room, we discarded 2 toys that were broken. Let's say this word together. Trudging. Trudging means walking with slow and heavy steps. On this page of our book, it says the Gancheros were trudging home from work. That means they were walking with slow and heavy steps home from work. We could use the word trudging another way. We could say, I can see my dog trudging through the deep snow as he walked outside.